Hey everyone, thanks for showing up. We had a great time watching this film. It'd be good to discuss it with all of you. Now, let me click the intro and we'll get going. All right. So, first time seeing this film, I imagine. It was the first time for me too.
Yeah, first time for me. I did see clips of it before. I think
Yeah, I think the dance scene I've seen online colorized before.
I know someone's made a music video for, was it 2525?
But only like small meme references, I guess,
Is
more or less.
that your phone?
No.
No.
I set the background music up. I always forget to do
Background music now. That's cool.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so right. So we've seen clips of it before, but the big thing was we've seen references to it before.
Yes. That was a recurring thread, a joke in our watch through. Was that was a reference to Metropolis.
Yeah. And that, for sure that's inevitable for any influential piece of fiction or piece of art, but this one certainly felt very modern because it was very modern, both in terms of its time period and what it influenced, right?
Yeah. I've seen it described online as being kind of a Marxist film. I think that might be misreading it a little bit. It doesn't. I could see where you take that with a workers' conversation, but I think the overall plot of it goes a bit deeper than just the workers' struggle, or at least the workers' struggle in the physical.
Right.
It's a very metaphysical film.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that a little bit, and I'll give my analysis a brief. Should I give it now?
Let me just I'll give a quick summary of the plot, just for people who haven't seen it. It's a futuristic city. No particular time. It's based off an old novel, and it's divided. The city is divided between the working class and the city planners. And the son of the city's mastermind falls in love with a working class prophet who predicts the coming of a savior to mediate their differences. The savior, obviously, being him. I would say no spoilers here, but the film's very old, but it is public domain, so you can go watch it for free right now. But yeah, so you wanted to give your analysis quick.
Oh, well, just on the sort of political aspect.
Yeah, the theme of it.
The theme of it, right? This could be extremely brief and subject to the criticism of anything brief, but sort of world historically, right? If you go all the way back to the inception of, let's say, modernity, sort of the Renaissance and the so-called Enlightenment and so on and so forth, sort of the big emphasis is on restructuring society, not around faith as a unifying factor, but reason defined in a very particular way. And there's an idea that you can sort of scientifically figure out politics, and that falls apart around 1914.
Yeah.
When just like the initial transition had been inspired by the religious wars, which seemed to sort of demonstrate on a massive level that religion couldn't unify society. Likewise, it seemed that science couldn't unify society. Now that thread, that idea still remains, especially among the elite. I'm looking at you, Bill Gates, and Belinda Foundation, but we see that very directly addressed here in a way that's important to us historically, with the whole, the bad news of the Hitler regime. But not just that, is what I want people to realize is, if religion doesn't do it, and if reason doesn't do it, then what does it? How do you get people to agree? And the answer, the next sort of logical step is to say it's emotion, right? It's the passions, it's aesthetics, right? Feeling. So there's a sort of Volksgeist, this together feeling kind of idea at the heart of this film, where we have to mediate between the different parts of society by appealing to a common source of ethics and politics that begins in feeling, in heart. And I would say, I don't think that's Marxist, or at least it's not inherently Marxist in that it doesn't seem a dialectical claim.
That's exactly what I was saying.
But
saying it's Marxist is only looking at the service value of, it's the workers and the employers, which is very basic.
Owners. Yeah, I mean,
surface level.
I won't say that like you can't read it Marxist.
Yeah.
In a Marxist, like, or in a materialist dialectical way, but I feel like the overall conversation envelops both that and the budding Nazi fascism, but just the world historical moment in general, and that's overseas as well. So if you go to like the United States, at this period in time is sort of the budding birth of advertisement, which is basically psyops by another name. Well, that's putting it too tinfoil hatty, perhaps, but
yeah.
Right, it's how it's mass influence through appeal to emotion and to a certain degree appeal to appetite. It might be a better way to put it, which would be a step down. But this is what I mean by we're at a certain point in history. And so these themes are not just, it's like this because of Marx, or it's like this because it's in Nazi Germany, but because that's sort of the trend of the times, right?
Yeah, to understand what this film is really trying to get across, you have to understand the history of the time, I think, anyway.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So the struggle, right, is not that book per se,
No.
but really a struggle that everyone is feeling at this time. Right?
Yeah.
How do we get in a world where technology is advancing? There's a clear separation between parts of society, right? And look, this is not a new critique. Okay, this is as old as Plato. It's older than Plato. We have to come up with a solution. How do we make sure the society is, of one mind about how to live? Because otherwise, there's violence, right? Which the movie itself shows.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and there's a reason why it stuck around so long, even when it was lost media for a while.
Lost in Argentina, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah. Did you know that they only recovered it in like the full film in 2008? So it was missing for that long, or at least the full cut that we ended up watching, which I would assume is the better one. There's also apparently a re-release in 1980. It was 1980. My brain says 84. I don't think it was 84. That's just because of the book. But there's a re-release where they had them be subtitles instead of intertitles to change up the pacing as well, which I think would be a mistake.
I mean, it speeds it up slightly.
Yeah, it speeds it up. I just don't think that messing with the intent of it that way would work. That's also why I'm starting to be against watching films at any sped up pace, even though I watch a lot of YouTube content that way. Because when something's made artistically like that, but that's a different discussion.
Right. We'll talk about the pace in a second.
Yeah. As far as what's next, I guess the characters and the actors.
Right.
Bridget Helm is great because she's playing two roles and doing it very well. She could do the crazy very well. She did that one. She made her eye kind of like go down in a way that I don't think a lot of people could do. A half wink. And that was genuinely unnerving.
Yeah. So the roles here, right? She plays Maria, who's the sort of prophetess, and the machine man,
who's I think called Futura.
Yeah. I
don't know if that's stated in the film.
I think that might just be for the American version. I don't know.
It was novelized.
I see.
So it's probably it was taken from that. It might just never come up in the.
They don't give her a name. Partially because I don't know, this is a tangent, but that character is very Promethean, right? Or polymorphian.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I think giving that character a name kind of takes away from that kind of primeval evil of it in a way. It's malice. It's like hatred of the world it's in, and that's partially because of the doctor who made it. But I don't know. There's something. It goes a bit further than that, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's just supposed to take on so many characters even within the film, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the Machine Man existing as the machine, but there's also supposed to become Hell according to Rotwang, but then turns out to impersonate Maria, but it's not really Maria.
Yeah. It's and the lead guy, Gustav, I believe, is the actor's name. It's Fredersen.
Yeah, Fred.
Fredersen, which is a hard name to say, and also to remember.
Freder, the son of Joe Fredersen.
He played his role very well. I don't really have much to say about his performance, though. It was pretty straightforward, to the point. There's not a whole lot to it. He does it well, though. I think the moments where he's at his best is when he's playing that kind of like naive, almost innocence at the way the world works.
I feel like he has a lot of genetics in sort of the German, like Goethe and even like someone like Victor Frankenstein, is playing this extremely I don't want to say Byronic, that's not the right word, but romantic character. Right?
Yeah,
in the classical sense.
That's definitely true. And there's a minor moment of the Prince and the Pauper in there as well for a sequence where he exchanges places with a worker who I do not recall the name of, and I don't think I put it on
it's
our list.
Georgie. How could you forget Georgie?
Yeah. Georgie, there we go.
Also known as 11811.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a I would say, is it prescient? Is it prescient? It's like workers are treated as nothing but numbers. It's like, well, we could tie that in. We could tie that into Nazi stuff. We could choose not to. But there's some irony there.
We actually noticed it was predictive of some future technology as well. Not to get too far off on the side with that, but even car phones, even though we don't have those right now.
Car phones. There's also the video call.
Yeah. Let's see. The Thin Man, also a great actor. Very unnerving, to say the least.
I feel like it feels like a character that in a different version of this, he would be doing a lot more sinister things. Because as it is, he's just kind of nefarious.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he does. Doesn't he withhold some important information at one point to cause trouble?
He threatens Josephat as well, who is the assistant of Freder.
Joe.
Old Fred
Joe.
boy. Joe. Well, Joe
Fredersen
initially,
Senior.
and then Freder eventually.
Oh, yeah.
For the majority of the film, I think I'd consider him assistant to Fredersen.
Yeah.
I did not put down the mad scientist's name, which is unfortunate.
It's Rotwang. How could you forget Rotwang?
Rotwang. Yes, Rotwang. His performance is fun. He's basically playing like your stereotypical of the time portrayal of Victor Frankenstein or that sort of thing. I think he's given a bit more depth to him, though, because of the conflict with wanting his daughter back. And
by stereotypical, by the way, what we actually mean is, have you ever seen Back to the Future? Yeah, he's Doc Brown.
Yeah, he's evil. Doc Brown. He's evil Doc Brown.
He very much looks like that.
And interestingly, the final conflict of the film is between Freder and him, which is interesting. I don't think that's necessarily what would happen in a film that came out today.
It makes sense thematically.
Yeah, it does. It makes sense thematically, absolutely. I just think in a modern film, they probably would have gone with the father being the antagonist, which I'm glad they didn't do. It doesn't make any sense. But let's see. Kind of gone through the actors. Favorite scenes? Anything in particular that stands out to you in your memory? I have a couple off the top of my head.
Absolutely, the scene pretty much at the start of the movie when Freder goes down and sees the heart machine transfigured into the image of was it Baal? Right?
Yeah, Moloch, I think.
A Moloch,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
I thought that was incredibly done.
Yeah, that's something about this type of film, invoking a feeling. It does it very effectively. I think if they gotten a little bit too far with it, it wouldn't have had any real impact. It was nice and simple. It was intimidating. People were just being dragged up into this machine and to basically hell. Obviously, I don't think that actually happened. I'm pretty sure that was a figurative scene.
Yeah, but
but that's what we saw,
what we remarked, right? Is that something about this style of filmmaking and sort of the low fidelity of it lending itself to being picturesque, allowed them to do these kinds of sort of visual metaphors or sort of daydreaming in reality, which works so well there.
Yeah. Evidently, they wanted to do dummies originally with that, but the director went, that would not look realistic enough, so there were people being pulled with cords and things.
Yeah.
It's just real actors.
Doing anything with real actors, it really feels real. Let's
see. The flooding scene.
Yeah.
I think just for the sheer scale of it, I'd say.
Yeah. The other vision scene as well, when Maria's talking about, telling her version of the story of Babel, that whole sequence, which is also was very much in the mind's eye, I thought that was really well done, and it sets up its own sort of iconic reverberation for the final scene, right? So you get Grot walking up to Fredersen, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
That I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. The handshake coming back is, of course, the whole point of the film. I feel like they almost completely butchered the story of the Tower of Babel, but
it's intentional, right?
It's intentional. It's done.
Right.
It's done to get a certain view across.
Yeah.
And it's forgivable considering it's a far distant future where it'd be like a folk tale at that point, kind of watered down and passed down through time.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not supposed to be accurate. It's supposed to. And remember, when you said it it's not within this religious context. It's not within this sort of Enlightenment context. It's within the context of, we have to find a solution, and the solution by process of elimination has to be heart, right? It's this sort of romantical, gothical notion, or vaguely postmodern notion.
Yeah, the heart standing for like the love of nation and neighbor and
together feeling.
Let's see. Oh, the dance scene and everything around it, as much as we probably can't show that on YouTube, everything around that as far as the Impressionism goes is great. Especially the scene where the statues of all the seven deadly sins and death come to life and transform into the men who are carrying the thing that she's dancing on.
The fake Maria. I thought that was visually striking. It's a little hard to watch. I'm just constituted that way.
It was definitely paced to be very unnerving as well.
Yeah.
I'd say. The sequences that were really interesting to me, which I guess they must have done through repeated compositing, was when you see all these facial expressions and the eyes of people all just stacked and layered together, just watching this happen. Those are I gotta make some reaction gifs out of those because some of those are pretty good.
They also do the similar thing at the Tower of Babel with all the sort of millions of slaves, marching in from the corners of the earth, and they turn into this stream of people that's obviously composited, but it adds to the unnerving effect.
Yeah, which is a callback also to the beginning of the film, where you see the workers coming in and going, just walking slowly, trudging with their heads down. And with the way the film looks, they don't even look human necessarily. With the hats they all have on, they kind of take on like a weird pointed aspect.
Yeah, they're both striking, and they achieve it in different ways.
Yeah.
That impresses me. Also, I think part of what makes any of the scenes with dancing in them really strict, the when they're dancing in a ring around um, all the workers dancing in a ring, as well
Oh, that
as
scene.
the sort of party goers who are driven bad by the fake Maria are rushing through the streets. Even to an extent, the dancing, right, the first scene in the movie, right, with all the fantastical future dresses, right,
Yeah.
fashions. I think part of it may be right. Didn't we notice that the way they moved looked like they were filmed slower and sped up?
Some of it seemed that way, yeah.
I think
I
that might
agree.
contribute to the sort of both the mechanical feeling and the sort of unnerving dreamlike reality of it. Frenetic energy. It's very mechanical because the
Yeah.
mechanical motion has been added.
Yeah, it's only fitting that that dancing plays a key part in this film because it's possibly the most impressionistic of art forms.
Maybe.
It's conveying something you literally can't see through movement alone.
It's also, in a certain sense, the most mechanical of all the art forms.
Yeah, that's true. It's very, you can be very particular about it. But yes, the scene at the end as well. What you're talking about, the parents all dancing while their kids are,
Or drowning underground.
and they don't know it.
They don't know it.
That is a freaky scene. That is a completely creepy scene. Even just the visual alone, without any context, would be unnerving, I think.
And it's it's a sort of seriously, it's a Nietzschean critique of putting your passion in the wrong place, right? Because he sort of went, when Nietzsche, I'm bringing stuff into it again, but right, when Nietzsche talks about sort of effectively that religion is the opiate of the people. I know that's a Marx line, but whatever. Right, he calls it a salve, right? And various behaviors that we do. He sort of says, okay, one way to relieve our nausea is to visit violence, right? To bring our emotion to a pitch. And he looks at, and he's talking about, and he says this is a bad thing. The outcome of this is bad. And he's looking at society, just before this movie comes out, essentially. And Germany is saying, look, we don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So I think it's relevant to bring it up here. But that's the same point the film is making is, heart can, we should be unified around some emotional core that allows us to agree on things, to create a consensus. But that consensus can't be one that's destructive of our very being, like the hatred of the machine that's brought up among the workers.
Yeah, or the hatred of others, or that sort of thing, which is interesting, because allegedly this was one of Hitler's favorite films, probably because it conveyed what the not exactly animus, but the concern of the time that you've been talking about, that he was just kind of a manifestation of, I'd say. You're talking about, since we're talking about the rational formation of countries not working as in World War One, where everybody, it was possibly the most violent. It was the most violent war to ever exist, and the most deadly war, at the time anyway.
Yeah. How do we come to a political or moral consensus?
Yeah, which is why he connected with the film, and of course why the director ended up fleeing to Paris.
Like I don't think you. Yeah.
You might not get this the way I'm trying to put it across.
Presumably, it's really funny, that particular story, because presumably the Nazi answer to how to produce the consensus of the heart is to make sure that everybody has genetically the same heart, so to speak, right?
Yes.
But then it's like, but you seem to share my vision. You can be an honorary art, and he did that quite often, I'm told. It's not a one-off story.
No, and since I don't know if I think we talked about it before the stream, but not on the stream. But the quick story is, Goebbels Goebbels really liked the film, and so he went to the director and said, "We'll make you an honorary Aryan, in spite of your Jewish past." And Goebel said, of course, something along the lines of, "We decide who's Jewish and who's not," and then Fritz Lang immediately fled to France afterwards.
Yeah.
But you're right; it's kind of like a innate hypocrisy in that. But I remember hearing he did that quite a lot too.
Yeah.
Which makes some sense. You kind of want to collect artists, so to speak.
I don't know. It's very depressing to think about.
It is depressing to think about.
But
yes, anyway, not to go too far with it, because this is not really the message of this film. Is kind of not exactly.
It's. I mean, if anything, if the director's response is anything, right, it's certainly not a Nazi word, but that's why we want to emphasize that it's both addressing the times and very much in the manner of the times, but also, this is a universal concern that we're still kind of struggling with, right? Especially if we look at current media, right? How do we produce?
We haven't solved this problem. We've just put it on hold with weapons.
Yeah.
With nukes.
No, not just that, right? I'm talking about we still have things like mass media, right? Mass media and mass advertisement basically exist as tools of creating common mass sentiment, right? And that's not inherently a negative thing, right?
No.
It's not like, you're telling me I watched this movie that everybody likes, and if I like it, I'm wrong. I'm a sheep. Well, that's not what I'm saying, but that's still very much like a reality of modern society. Is if we're trying to, address the issue of consensus, the first thing that we go to is either heart or appetite.
Yeah, and I think we lean more towards appetite. In this day and age.
Yeah.
But also, not to go too far off this, because this is a film discussion, but the idea of how much the internet is fractured that common consensus is interesting as well.
Yeah.
And we're kind of living in a very historical period. You're going to look back. We're going to be looking back on this in 20 or 30 years and just wonder how we didn't even notice it at the time. I think. But anyway, not to go too far on that, because we're talking about the future from the past.
About the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of future, should we address the sort of purely filmic resonances, right? The things we've drawn from Metropolis as a film, as a pure art, shall we say? Like, what are the things we've already mentioned a few, right?
Yeah, we did. I think his work really inspired the design work, I should say, specifically of Futura. Really inspired the work of Ralph McQuarrie, who did the artwork for Star Wars, and that's just me. I haven't really looked into what he says his inspirations are, but it seems pretty evident that it's not exactly Art Deco. There's a certain look to the android that is definitely present in the concept art for certain characters of Star Wars, like C-3PO comes to mind in particular.
Wait. Is that a prequel? Is that a prequel thing? What is C-3PO? Is like a human cyborg relations?
Oh yeah, even more.
It's a communications tool.
Yeah. What else? We had a bunch of them. A lot of them were jokes though, so it's kind of hard to parse out.
Here's an even deeper cut. C-3PO in the Aeronauts edition. He wants people's skin. Just like,
you're right.
so these kinds. Okay, so the references never stop. I don't know if they're making an explicit Metropolis reference.
No, but I think it's just such an inherent part of the background of science fiction at this point that it's impossible to not have some kind of subconscious reference to it if you're in this genre of film.
Yeah. I suppose the other question is, what does Metropolis draw from? Is there anything older than it, or does it really, is it really a first instance, at least on screen, of all these elements, even if they come from elsewhere?
I would say probably a lot of H.G. Wells' work, specifically The Time Machine. I'd argue with the Morlocks, right?
That's what the Eel and the Morlocks. Yeah. I mean, there's strong similarities there. Yeah.
Yeah. As well, what was it in? Shelley, of course, right? With Frankenstein.
Definitely the Mad Doctor. because that's all German romanticism / Gothic stuff. It's all in the background of science fiction. But yeah, definitely present here in a extremely strong
yes
similarity.
I think, and that might be present specifically in the novel, which made its way into the film. But I think generally speaking, those are the main draws, especially what H.G. Wells. I believe the director said something along the lines of he was on a ship in the harbor of New York, and that's where he drew a lot of inspiration for Metropolis, which makes sense because that was the city at the time, and and I guess in a way kind of still is. For the visuals of it, at least. I know the taxi cabs were based on the most modern taxi cabs that were on the street of Berlin at the time. I saw that information out there. I also saw that there's supposed to be more depth in the city shots, but the art guy thought, "Oh, this is too dark back here. I'll brighten it up." When they're processing it, so they completely ruined any depth of field, and it just which I think works in some ways. Visually, it creates a certain feeling to it that it wouldn't have otherwise. Maybe more, I don't know, not exactly romanticized, but it feels a little airy, dreamlike. Yeah,
there were definitely a few shots that looked just like an Escher physically impossible geometry shots.
Yeah, like the tower, for example.
Yeah, those are actually really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and the Japanese name we saw at one point for the club?
Yeah.
That was a reference to a infamous red light district in Japan, apparently.
Oh.
Which is something I didn't catch. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So that's something there. I've never been to that district, so I guess I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
As far as the score goes, it's hard to talk about. Because I was listening through, and I don't know if what we listened to with the film was the original score or not. I think it was. I think a good chunk of it was. Because it was extended so much, a lot of the score is missing, I believe.
Okay.
So, when we heard certain songs or compositions, I think some of those were just put in because they had the right feeling for the scene. I think you noticed that particularly towards the end in the flooding scene. There's not a whole lot to say about the musical score. It does its job. It does what I'm kind of 50-50 on, where it's in the background and not super noticeable. It just helps the film move along rather than, I don't know, distracting from it, like some film scores can do.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And I suppose that's. I suppose that's pretty important for silent film.
Yeah, it really is. So it did its job very well. I would recommend listening to the actual score online. It's pretty good. Very fitting for what it is. As far as production goes, it sounds like the company that started making this film ended up not making enough money back at all because it was too long, as this would make sense. I think
it was too long.
They spent, it was 2.5 hours long. So they couldn't fit enough showings in the day to make a profit.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they got a loan for $4 million or something, which at the time was obviously.
Yeah, that's a real bankbuster.
I should look this up. Inflation calculator. I just want to see. I should have done this earlier.
$4 million 100 years ago.
I think 27. Enter. And then it's 4. Calculate. 67,277,000.
Wow.
In inflation. That's insane to think about. They made no money on this, but thank you for doing this because it was a great film and it really influenced a lot.
Yeah. Paved the way for a bunch of other people to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, and where I heard the Marxist critique of the film was that when the company got taken over by a more conservative board of people, they thought that this film was promoting Marxist ideology, and so they pulled it from theaters. So they literally couldn't make the money back at that point.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curious capitalist.
Yeah. Not very good at it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything else we want to talk about with this?
Maybe a lot of the biblical imagery, we did touch on that, right? That they sort of twisted the tale of Babel.
And her name's Maria. I mean,
the Maria, right?
Josephat.
Right. And Josephat, I mean, that's just similar, I think. Or maybe that's the German version of the name.
Think it is the German version. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Let's see what else. There's the bit from the Apocalypse of St. John, right? Also called the Revelation. Right?
The Whore of Babylon reference, I think.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. That was pretty good. Her costume there was excellent.
It's really interesting to me that those are both very iconic images, right? You know, Apocalypse and Babel, but it's interesting that they sort of took this beginning and end, you know, the beginning of the world, the end of the world, or, you know, two different collapses of civilization. And that's really what they focused on. Almost, there's very little of anything else. There's also that bit I remember. Rotwang's little hidden cottage in the edge of town, so to speak.
Yes, we thought that looked like the house from Up.
Well,
a little bit, and you thought it was a church.
I thought it was a church because these cross beams made it look like there's a cross on front, and then in daylight, you see that actually it's just a bunch of beams, and I wondered if that was intentional, like trying to make it look like a place that's hospitable, but actually it's full of danger. Whereas the catacombs, although it's full of skulls, is actually more like a church. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that was another great shot of her in the catacombs. That was a good set in general. But the angle they shot it from, which is up and back, really gave it a sense of scale that was impressive.
The catacombs, I feel, really does a lot to make plausible the idea of an undercity, and it's very vertical, strategized. Because what's the idea contained there is both. That the city is built on top of a city, as all cities are. Yeah. As also that people will hide out under there, and it brings to mind sort of the ruined civilizations that exist below you, kind of like the idea of Babel, right? So it's almost as if the Babel that they're talking about in the ruins is something that we need to build off of and learn from in order to build a successful city on top.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good reading of that. How you mentioned that Superman City was named Metropolis? I thought it was just like, here's the word for a big city, right? But no, apparently they were inspired by this film to name the city Metropolis.
It makes sense.
Which, it does make sense. I know I make a lot of Star Wars references because I used to really like Star Wars. I can't help it. But Metropolis, Coruscant is very clearly kind of paralleling this because it's a layered city in that way, with the undercity that it's kind of structured sort of similarly. So that's something interesting. I think it's specifically with the prequel trilogy, Lucas drew a lot of inspiration from this film, which maybe I don't know, for a lot of people it's probably not a ringing endorsement, but
and well, maybe we would have said that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But 10 years, now we love the prequels in that, so. Relatively. So there's the interesting use of biblical imagery that's very contained, right? I don't know, it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, it feels a lot more prominent than in current film, as if that's sort of the touchstone of what everybody can recognize in terms of imagery. And that makes sense, right? It's
at the time, yes. It was kind of like the fabric.
And also just like how you would make a political allegory is, obviously back then you wouldn't say, let's compare things to Nazis. For the obvious reason
that they hadn't quite happened in the way they thought.
Or they were, they're just, coming to be. I feel like that's a bit refreshing because I feel it gets stale, Not because it's unimportant, but just because, when was the last time you heard anyone compare a political situation to the Rule of 30 in Athens? It's like, well, never.
Yeah. We're very limited in our cultural references in the modern day, which is a little frustrating. But hey, what can you do? Besides make it better.
Yeah. Do you want to talk any more about the character? I feel like we didn't talk that much about Josephat, but I felt like he was the one that had the clearest arc, really.
Yeah, we can talk about him. I'd be fine. Yeah, we can go ahead with that. I mean, we kind of skip around. We're a little... we go off in tangents, but that's what conversation is, so it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, he begins by being a bit of a meme. Why am I hearing this from Grot instead of you, Josephat?
Yeah.
Why am I hearing this from my son? So, right, Josephat begins by being the sort of, maybe incompetent, maybe almost sinister character who's, keeping things hidden from the father about the situation in the mine, in the art machine, in the mines where the people are slaving away and dying. And it makes Joe a lot more sympathetic because he seems like a man who wouldn't just happily sit by while workers are dying. And it serves to mollify our fears that the father is just a villain. But then he becomes a sympathetic character when Joe kicks him out for these failures, and then the son's like, "Hey, I'll take you in. Just go to my apartment." And then he ends up coming around and tag teaming with the son to both to protect him and to protect the children of the workers.
Yeah, it's a very interesting friendship they have. Very compelling. And people are a lot more comfortable to get handsy with each other at that time period. Like lots of hugging and holding of hands and stuff. And obviously a lot of that's theatrical as well, but you wouldn't really see that in a modern film, I would say. That relationship between two men specifically, without it being taken a certain way, I guess. Let's see. The father was a much more sympathetic character than I thought. And actually, his arc in the film is why I don't really think of it as a Marxist film at all. Because the ending is not seize the means of production. It's come to an agreement with the means of the one who helps with that. Talk to the guy who helped make the city.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Or another way to put it, right, is right. And so what was the motto of the film? Is between the heart and the hands, the heart must mediate, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It seemed very much to take as granted, like the distinction between, the class that plans and the class that works. Right? It's like that's just inevitable. It's just that there needs to be a common out. Oh, this is interesting. This is sort of the interesting part of Babel is the way they present the story of Babel is that Babel was a project to glorify not just humanity, but to glorify God and man, and that was a project. Yeah. But the thinkers could never make it understood to the workers that this is what they're working on, and so it became a curse word for the workers, and that's why it collapsed. Which is like a really weird way to tell the story.
Very strange.
Perhaps a bit hubristic if you take the original sense of the story, but definitely. In terms of a criticism of both intelligentsia as not being sort of popular enough, if you will, right? Not opening themselves up to common understanding, but also it doesn't put like any moral criticism on the part of the workers, if you will. It's just that when it sort of puts the onus on them to be understanding when understanding is possible, right? Yeah,
that's kind of the whole point of the film, and that's why the son is such an important character. He is the connecting tissue between the two parts of the body, because obviously the whole metaphor is that the city is a body, the heart machine and the
and in order to become the heart, Freder has to go down and work at the heart machine for this intolerably long shift, right, where he's nigh crucified upon that dial machine.
Yeah.
that literally communicates, between sort of the orders sent from above and the machine itself.
Yeah. It's very compelling in that way.
Yeah, the imagery is very powerful there.
Yeah. It's because he has to control two of the clock hands, or what basically looks like clock hands. If you're not someone who's seen the film, so he's like, moving it around like that, and the way they shoot it, it does convey that sort of not exactly crucifixion, but something along the lines of it.
I will say it does have a very pro-labor message. Yeah. Right. It does say like the conditions are intolerable. The children of the poor should be like segregated off from the fruits of society, right? In the gardens of pleasure. It should be a place where your brothers, are also benefiting from the work that the fathers have done to make the city.
Yeah.
So in that sense, right, it's very much a sympathetic film.
It's interesting to think about in the context of the time. Apparently, when this film was made, because they wanted to find like 500 children for it, and because of the economic situation at the time, because this is right before, this is like Weimar Germany, right, roughly. Mm-hmm. Everybody they had no problem finding that many kids. I don't think they even paid them that much. And the same goes for all the background extras. So some of those scenes that were going, oh, it must be compositing, a lot of that actually was shot with that scale of people.
Wow.
Yeah, evidently. So that does tie in. It's terrible. Yeah. And also very interesting to see they get to live the experience of the film in a way.
Yeah.
What was it? An offset. I was trying. There was one piece of trivia that I was trying to figure out. Where was this? It was about the actress.
About the actress Maria.
She was. Yeah. There was a bit where, during the transformation scene, she fainted. Evidently, because it was actually her in the costume. It wasn't like a body double or anything.
Oh my goodness.
But it's not the one I was thinking of.
We can come back.
There was some point where she ran. Some point where she, I think it was the flooding scene where she ran off because she was so traumatized by the filming of it.
Wow.
Yeah. But I don't know. Her performance is incredible. Arguably the best one in the entire film.
Electrifying.
Yeah. But as far as the actors go, I think that's about it. I don't have too much to say about everybody else.
I really like Brock's casting.
Ah, yeah.
Edmund. He really looks like a real chunk of a man,
That's true.
Set him. I know this is like. It's the resonant image between the Babel story where these workers are like shaking their fists at the thin intelligentsia, and then you see the modern version, and Joe Fredersen is like real, this very intellectual looking kind of skinny man, almost a skeleton himself, and then Grot, who's it's like it's a beefcake.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful, man.
And so The Man Who Laughs came out a year after this film, and I really think The Thin Man was inspired. The Thin Man inspired that character. I was looking this up, and The Man Who Laughs is infamously the film whose lead influenced the creation of the Joker. And I think The Thin Man has a similar look to him and presentation.
Are you telling me the Thin Man lives in a society?
He lives in society, yeah. He works for society. But yeah, anyway, that's just a little connection that I tried to say sometime during our watch party, but I wasn't quite clear in the details, so I wanted to clarify that a little bit now that we're here. Well, I think that's about everything. Any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? It was a grand movie. It didn't feel like 3 hours. I guess that's because it's 2.5 hours. But
still.
Yeah, I think Yeah, it really holds up to like other long viewing experiences. Like recently I watched Dune.
Hmm.
Well, not super recently, but when I watched Dune, um, the modern version, that's also a very long movie. And like side by side, I don't think the power of the imagery loses out in any way.
No.
So it really goes to show how much the impact of something is not its technical quality, but its artistic quality. Right? And I'm not knocking Dune. It's very
No,
well
but
done.
yes, and because obviously Dune is kind of respected for that technology
Exactly,
and the
yeah.
way it's presented. But I think the pacing is better in this film.
Well, that's inevitable because
Yeah.
it's a whole story. Well, wasn't the novel basically written for the film anyway?
No, apparently
It
not.
wasn't?
At least not from what I saw.
Huh.
I may have misread something, but as far as I saw, it was just a popular novel at the time.
Mm.
They did serialize it as this film was coming out, though, in a magazine or a newspaper, I should say.
So it's a multimedia work as well.
Yeah, basically, so people could experience reading the novel before the film if they couldn't happen to find it at the time. Because you obviously have to remember this was in Germany, and possibly the worst economic point in German history ever, which makes the excess spending of it incredible in that context.
Well, it's trying to produce that heart,
Yeah.
I guess one other thing is because I'm so impressed by especially the sort of impressionistic bits in this movie, I would really like to see a few movies or stories made that would be done in this way. Because I used to think that really the only medium that could do these kinds of dream transformation sequences well were animation.
Yeah.
And having seen this, I think I've changed my mind on that. I think there's a lot of stuff that could be still done in the style and live action. That would
we'll have to check
have
out more of these German impressionist kind of films. I think you'd appreciate a lot of them. I think the most famous, besides this one, is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah, I'd love to watch that.
That would be great. And then we can watch a couple older films. As far as my final thoughts on this is, it feels like a modern movie, even though it came out almost 100 years ago, which is interesting because it just kind of helped form what people see in their mind for a sci-fi, even if it was lost for so long.
Yeah.
I would absolutely recommend it, especially since it's free now. It's public domain. You could just go and download it. It's out there.
You could make your own fan fiction and sell it. It's public domain.
So besides that, I don't really have a whole lot else to say. I'm pretty happy with our discussion here. I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to. Do you have anything else other than that?
It's a good movie. Go watch it.
Yeah, go watch it. I gave it 2 thumbs up.
I agree. Yeah.
Anyway, he can't do thumbs up because he's just an avatar, but I'm sure he's doing it anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, be back next time. I should be doing a stream with another YouTube guy. I won't say for sure right now, just to make sure it's actually happening, but that'll be great. And then after that, I'll be doing another stream with Sleepy. We haven't decided what film we're doing, but I have a couple ideas in mind. As far as channel stuff goes in general, I'll be getting a riff up soon enough, probably by the end of the month. That's the goal, is the last Friday of the month. And and Sleepy and I are streaming Dark Souls, the game, over on his Twitch channel. It's been a pretty good time, minus some anger-inducing things. We're doing it Saturdays, roughly at noon Pacific, generally. So, yeah, besides that...
Stop on by.
Yeah, stop on by. Be happy to have you around. And with that, I guess I'll see you all later. Stay copacetic.
Take care.